Next up, we have Renee Lopez, who's one of our Opening Minds, Opening Doors speakers at VSA Texas. We're adults with disabilities who write personal stories and share them at venues like this. So I'll let her up here. You got enough space to get by that way?
I tried.
Right on.
I didn't take anybody's toes, so I did pretty good. I don't know about you guys, but hold on, I'm trying to find my, okay, there we go. This is the first time I've ever read from the phone, because I forgot my papers at home. And I don't know about you guys, but when I think of poetry, I immediately think of love sonnets and love poetry. And but given that I have no talent whatsoever at writing poetry, I'm not going to recite anything, but I want to consider this story. This was an assignment about pets that we had in our OMOD class. And I decided to read that because this is, to me, a love sonnet. But it isn't going to rhyme, but maybe you'll enjoy it. And it's called Bailey. I've always loved dogs. I've had them around most of my life. However, this story is about Bailey. My boyfriend Bill and I moved in together. We had bought a big, beautiful house. We were so happy in it, but something was needed to make it feel complete. We finally figured it out. A dog. We set out to the animal shelter and found that many of the dogs were afraid of my wheelchair. Sadly, we left and decided to try another day. In the meantime, we decided to get doggy supplies so we could have everything ready for when we finally found our dog. One Saturday afternoon, as we were going through PetSmart, I just happened to see a flyer on the wall that said, "Free to a good home. 8-month-old male golden retriever found running in the park." I gasped. I couldn't believe it. I love golden retrievers, as did Bill, but we didn't want to pay for a purebred. We wanted to just give a happy home to a dog that needed one. But lo and behold, here he was. We called immediately when we got home, and this was before cell phones. That same afternoon, we went to the apartment complex where the couple lived to meet the dog. The couple were young and really nice, but they already had a golden retriever, and their apartment was just too small for 2 big goldens, so they wanted to find a good home for Bailey, as they had named him. As soon as they brought Bailey out, Bailey immediately jumped on us and started licking our faces. He wasn't fazed by my wheelchair at all. We agreed to pick him up the next day. In our haste to get home, we forgot to call about Bailey. We forgot all about getting the doggy stuff. So we went back to PetSmart and bought food, canned and dried toys, treats, a bed, snacks, everything but a crib. The next morning, we went to pick him up. He got into the back seat almost without any coaxing, almost as if he knew he was going home with us. We get home. I lowered my ramp of my van, and he took off running. Oh my God. He wasn't trying to get away. He just wanted to run. So we rolled after him, yelling, "Bailey, stop!" My heart was pounding crazily as he was about to run into a busy street. Suddenly, getting off the bus was my attendant. He started yelling, "Grab him, grab him!" She was aware that we were getting Bailey, so she realized the situation immediately and grabbed him. Oh God, what a relief. We get Bailey home. That same night I was fixing dinner, sausages to be exact. I had put a sausage on each plate on the counter and turned back towards the stove. As I was about to spoon the beans onto the plates, I turned around and the sausages were gone. That Bailey had jumped and put his front paws on the counter and took off with the sausages. We had to eat just beans that night. Bailey was also a mischievous little prankster. He loved to hide clothes. Once he took off with a pair of Bill's pants that were laying on the bed. Another time when my mom was visiting, he took her sweater. We were to find it later in the corner of the washroom. That rascal. Bailey grew into a big, lanky boy. He weighed 80 pounds. He was rambunctious, and many times Bill and I would say that we couldn't wait for him to turn 5 so he could calm down. What Bailey needed most, though, was walking. Now, that was something I had never done before, walk a dog. Because Bill had to work, I was often left alone with him. He was so hyper, he was driving me crazy. I finally figured out a way to wrap his leash around my chair in a way where he wouldn't dump me over. Bailey and I took a million walks together. It got to where we were recognized in the neighborhood. Neighbors would come out to greet us, and I got to meet a lot of my neighbors. Children especially loved Bailey. Many would be playing outside and would run to greet us and give Bailey hugs and rubs. On Sunday mornings, as Bill slept in, Bailey and I would leave early in the morning and go to the park. Sometimes we were all alone and we sat by a creek. Sometimes there were soccer games and we would watch the kids play. Most of the time, I loved taking Bailey for a walk, except when it was frigid cold outside. But because he was so rambunctious, he needed a walk. So with love in my heart, I would put on layers of clothes, my heavy peat coat, a hat, earmuffs, gloves, and a scarf, and off we'd go. Of course, the cold weather didn't bother him at all. Bailey also loved to rub his back into his own poop. I can't tell you how awful it was to have to clean that poop off of him while trying not to gag. We decided that Bailey could use some obedience training. We had to leave him at a training camp for a week. We felt we were like leaving our child at a summer camp. I fretted at night that he might be lonely or not be treated well. Finally, the camp trainer called and said Bailey was ready. When we got there, we had to stay at a distance to watch him do his routine because they didn't want us distracting him. Bailey did great until he somehow sensed we were around. He spotted us, forgot all about his performance, took off running at full speed towards us, knocked over cones. The trainer almost got dragged by the leash. I mean, it was total mayhem. Bailey flew into our arms and yelled and cried and licked the glasses right off our faces. The trainer just threw her hands up in the air, sat down, just shook her head. Bailey jumped into the van like he was ready to go now. The trainer offered to train him for another week, free of charge, but we said, no, let's just go home. Eventually, Bailey did learn things on his own. He would pick up his leash with his mouth and hand it to me and waited patiently while I wrapped the leash around my chair. Saturday afternoons were my favorite. After spending time at the park and walking, the three of us would lay down in our bed and take a nap. Bailey would lay between us, and Bill and I would wrap our arms around him. Bailey would turn on his back, and Bill would kiss him on one side of his face, and I would kiss him on the other. Bailey's tail would wag like crazy, and we would laugh and laugh. Time went on, and Bailey got older. Eventually, he did turn 5, and he did calm down. But we still went on our walks, only not so far and not so often. Eventually, he got even older, and then he was 16. His face was white, like a bearded old man. He still loved his walks, but he started falling, and we could only go half a block at the most. One day, Bailey had difficulty getting up off the floor. The vet said he had hip dysplasia. At some point, he couldn't walk anymore, and then he lost his appetite. We decided to let him go. Bill and I cried like babies, but Bailey passed very peacefully. He had a look of peace on his face instead of pain. Bailey always smiled, and I swear he was smiling as he transitioned. Bill and I eventually separated. We sold the house and I moved away. I remember when I was a kid hearing a song called Mr. Bojangles, and the verse, after 20 years he still grieved. This was after Mr. Bojangles' dog died. I totally understand that now. I firmly believe that Bailey was a gift from heaven. I also believe that dog spelled backwards spells God, because dogs are the reflection of unconditional love. I also believe Bailey allowed Bill and I to express love that perhaps we were too afraid to express to each other. He taught two hard, cynical, deeply wounded people the depth of love, something we thought we no longer had for anything, much less anyone, much less each other. Every once in a while, Bill and I will meet up, and inevitably our conversation turns to Bailey. At first we laugh as we remember him, and then just like the song, when we get to his death, we choke up. We still tear up. after 20 years, we still grieve. But then in consolation, we imagine what Bailey must be doing in heaven. We agree that he's probably hiding God's sandal or chewing on it. He's probably jumping on all the angels, getting their robes dirty like he did our clothes. And he probably still rolling around in his poop, only in heaven, it doesn't stink.